Today is the 18th day of August, 2023, and we welcome you to our Chapter 49 podcast. Always great to have you with us. We use this as one of our main communication efforts for Chapter 49. We represent most IRS employees in the state of Indiana. My name is Larry Landon. I'm a retiree and a volunteer with Chapter 49, dealing with communications and some other odds and ends every now and then. A reminder that we do have a Facebook page. You can check our Facebook page where we have regular updates. Our Facebook page can be found if you go to Facebook and just search under NTEU Chapter 49 Indiana. That exact phrase, you can follow or like our page and get the regular updates on your news feed. And if you would like to get updates and a heads up every time we have a new podcast, both a video and audio version, Duncan Giles will be happy to give you a link and send it to you on email. You just send him an email. He'll put you on the list. The email address to put that request in is nteu49@aol.com. Speaking of Duncan Giles, he's always with us, and he's back again. Welcome back, Duncan.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here.
And you've been a traveling guy. We were not here last week because you were traveling to the great motor city of Detroit for the National Convention of NTE. Excuse me. National Convention happens every 2 years, and every 4 years there's a vote for the national officers, the national president, national executive vice president. So all that happened and much more. So before we get into all that, something even more important happened when you got back. The convention wrapped up on Thursday. You and Kim, your significant other, drove back from Detroit rather than fly, drove all the way back from Detroit, which is a good long day's drive. That was on a Friday. What did you do Saturday? You had a wedding ceremony. So congratulations to you and the bride, Kim. And what's it like being a married man again for not quite a week yet?
Thank you for the congratulations. It's great. As I like to say, I've outkicked my coverage in my bride. Definitely a wonderful, wonderful lady. And no, it's just great to know that our future's together. And, we've already gotten through to get our marriage license certified by the city. So as Kim likes to call it, it's official, and just moving forward together.
Well, it's always good to be official. That's
exactly.
By the way, I outkicked my coverage 32 years ago. So yeah, I know exactly how you feel. So I'm glad to hear that you and Kim, who you've been together for a while now as significant others, and now you've tied the knot. You are married, and I'm very happy for both of you on a personal level. So let's talk about the convention. Conventions are really interesting. I've been a delegate to the convention twice back in the 1990s when I served as vice president of Chapter 49. And so you are, you always seem to be in the mix, whatever's happening at a convention. So just if you can, give us a summary of the highlights, and then we can maybe dig down into some more details later. But give us your overview.
Yeah, the main thing that happened at this convention is the fact that it was, Tony Reardon's last one. He started the convention as national president and ended it as a member because of the fact that he is retiring. So he is, that was a big emotional thing for the vast majority of the delegates who've gotten to know him over the years. And we, by acclamation, because there was no opponent, Doreen Greenwald was nominated and put in as national president, and we elected a CBP officer, chapter president out of San Francisco, Anand Mooney, who's a very nice gentleman, and looking forward to getting to know him better. We passed several resolutions to try and better the federal workforce that we can, because one of the things that always strikes you about convention is, NTU doesn't just represent IRS. We are now 35 different agencies because we just picked up one more during the end of convention. Um, and so it's interesting to see the mix of different folks in there who have all sorts of, different issues and things of that nature due to their different work areas. So that's always interesting. It was good to get together with everyone, exchange ideas, have discussions, things of that nature.
And Mr. Muni did have an opponent, so there was an election there, and basically you could go to more than one ballot, but this was adjudicated, or I should say adjudicated, was the election only took one ballot, correct?
Yeah, he had two opponents, and he won. He had an over 50% of the vote in the first ballot, so he won on the first ballot itself. And again, there were several of us that thought that it was good to have someone, CBP, Customs and Border Protection, not Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection, is our second biggest agency that we represent. And so to have somebody from there at a high level, as well as someone of color, we all thought was a good thing. We want to try and represent all of our membership. And this is a great step to that direction. Doreen had gotten to know him and chose him as her running mate. And so, Doreen Greenwald being a guest on this podcast and someone I've known since well before she became a chapter president up in Wisconsin, is someone I trust wholeheartedly and know she'll do great for NTEU because the woman just advocates.
Well, we'll get Doreen back on the podcast. We've had her on before as executive vice president. Well, once she's got her feet wet, I'm sure she's going through that initial drinking out of the fire hose when you're brand new at a job. So I'm sure she'll eventually join us, and we'll certainly want Anand to come on and speak with us at some point. And it's interesting because I have been not to conventions and other events where the customs people are there that NTU represents and has for many years, and they will make it real clear. And you just pointed that out. They are Customs and Border Protection. They are not Customs and Border Patrol. Those people are represented by another union, and they have a whole different, how should I put it, mission, because the people we represent are the people who are right at the border, checking people in and out, going across that border either way. The patrol, they do something entirely different, and they're real quick to point that out to you.
Oh yeah, and they do not like to be confused with that other agency. So you make sure, and they are great folks. The ones that I deal with, every 2 years or more, depending, because I, talk to a great many of them, regularly, because I try and talk to it doesn't matter whether it's IRS, CBP, we represent folks in Health and Human Services, EPA, whatever it might be. I think it's very important to talk to the other chapter presidents to see what's going on, to make sure that we're all pulling forward for federal employees. That's our job. And there's a great deal of commonality in what we need to do and what we're working towards. So I always try and keep those doors open and the lines of communication very open.
I think a convention is many things, and you do have business to conduct, as you just mentioned. But I think one of the most important parts of a convention is that NTU, as you said, 35 different agencies, IRS being the largest, but Customs Border Protection also being the second largest. And there are a lot of small agencies that have chosen to become a part of NTEU. And I know that the union does its best to do what needs to be done to get their issues resolved. But I do think a convention is at one time every 2 years when all the different parts of NTEU come together, the leaders come together, and get a chance to speak with each other. And you have your squabbles, you have your disagreements. I mean, hey, that comes with it. But really, I think my experience has been, and I'd like your view as to how it stands now, is that even after all those debates and so forth are done, at the very end, this is a very unified group. We have a lot in common. We have very much to accomplished together. So did you get that impression that unity was there in this convention?
Yeah, and that's what you heard from the Tony Reardons, the Doreen Greenwalds, the Anon Moonies in their speeches, and also from a lot of the delegates, myself included, that we are one in TEU. We're, all representing and pulling for our constituents who are all federal employees. So, as like you said, there's a lot of commonality to that, and we just want to make sure that everybody's pulling together. It's like a family. Sometimes you have disagreements or differences, but don't let anybody from outside the family come at one of us, because all of us will be there. I would also like to make a special note that the look on several people's faces when they started rolling the video for the convention, and they heard a familiar voice doing the voiceovers, and people were going, "Was that?" Yeah, it was. Yes, it was, Larry. Yes, it was.
Well,
So
and
yeah,
that's an interesting story, because I was asked to do that for some complicated reasons. They were having, I won't get into the whole thing, but there was difficulty finding someone that they normally use to do the voiceover, and I was quite I was quite happy to help out when I was asked to help, and it was a high level professional thing. I went to a local recording studio when we got it. We did several takes and got it done. And I when I saw first of all, I saw the script, and then when I saw the final product with the video mixed in with it, I could say, okay, I can see where there were some boo lines that were included there. We're talking about certain people doing certain things to federal employees, but there were a lot of applause lines in there too. So it was fun to be involved with that, and I was honored to be asked to be a part of that. And speaking of honors, I think we should say, Duncan, that 2 years ago, this podcast won a communications award for. I mean, it's done based on how large a bargaining unit is, and based on our size of bargaining unit. 2 years ago, we won the communications award, which was quite a high honor, and we appreciated that. I remember hearing you start talking to you when you got back from the convention. You said, well, they gave out the communications award, and we didn't think we'd get it 2 times in a row. They would give somebody else a chance to be honored for their work. And then lo and behold, something else happened. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, we got an award for specifically for this podcast. A special media award, special use of media, for us bringing this message to the not only to our members, but sending it out nationwide. And it goes out, as you and I have both discovered, for whatever reason. Once you put something out on the, out there in the internet ether, it goes everywhere. So I was very honored and shared that with you, and we were both very honored that they did come up with this and recognize the good work that we do with this. I will have a caveat that apparently being your agent, when they were talking about what they wanted to pay you, and I was coming back to our wonderful director of communications, Sheila McCormick of NTU, who's an awesome lady and does a great job, did tell me during the convention at one point when I was asking a question on something totally different, said, "Oh, by the way, Duncan, I am going to kill you," which I thought was an interesting thing to say. But apparently I was asking for a little bit too much money for you for doing the voiceover. I'm not sure. But it was all in fun, and everyone appreciated your efforts of doing this. And it's gratifying to know that the folks in our NTU national office realize what we've tried to do is make this a great service and get out the issues of the day literally every week, as many weeks as we can, to all of our members and the members across the country that view or listen to this podcast.
Well, and I'll give it right back to you, because it took a lot of faith in me, and it took your ability to roll the dice and take a chance on this. We had no idea if this was going to work out or not. It could have just fallen on its face. And here we are in our third year of doing this. We don't get every week, but most weeks we are on. And we've even one time did a special edition when a news story came up that we thought was important to people. So you certainly deserve a lot of the credit too. You were willing to go out on a limb and do this, and you still take time out of your busy schedule being a chapter president every week to do this. And I take time out of my very busy schedule being a retired guy. Isn't that something? Don't think it's quite even, but whatever. All right, let's get to our issues of the week now. And we're right back to government shutdown again, right back where we were before. However, 2 weeks ago, when we had our last podcast, it was very difficult to imagine a situation where anything could come together. But in just the last couple of days before we record this, there have been some, there have been some comments made, not just by Chuck Schumer, the Senate leader, the Democratic leader, and the majority leader in the Senate, but also from House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, the Republican, that they've been talking and that there is no budget that's going to be done by the end of September. That's pretty clear. So will there just be a government shutdown, or will there be a continuing resolution to give more time to get this done? And it looks, Duncan, like there's at least a possibility, a stronger possibility now than 2 weeks ago, that there will be a continuing resolution to at least keep the government running while these discussions about the budget continue.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, 2 weeks ago, all we were hearing about was people who wanted to shut the government down. There wasn't anything talking about any sort of continuing resolution. So the fact that they've been talking about this the last couple of days is a great thing, because as you and I know, and a lot of folks out there are learning, is Congress takes their recesses very seriously. And the folks won't be there until September. And so they've only got a few work days in September to try and get something done until the October 1st deadline. And they're not, like you said, it would be darn near impossible for them to come up with a budget for every agency by then. So the best that we can hope for at this point is a short, relatively for the government, a short government continuing resolution. They've been talking, I've been hearing early December. So to try and force a decision for later in the year and for them to get their ducks in a row. It's still not going to be an easy process. I think the Senate is much further along and much more bipartisan at this point than the House is. I'm hoping that the House can take the lead take a hint from the Senate and saying, we can get this worked out. There can be budget deals made, and we can get this worked out to do the work that the American people sent them to do. But, a continuing resolution would be a great step towards that. And I'm hopeful, not optimistic at this point, but hopeful that we can get one.
And just for those who, every now and then we get people who are new to this that come to the podcast, just a reminder what a CR or a continuing resolution is. It means that even when the fiscal year ends in September, when the new budget year begins October 1st, a continuing resolution keeps the government funded based on the previous year's budget. So that's what you use until you get the final budget passed, whenever that gets done. Sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes it takes months, and sometimes you have a shutdown before it's done. But that's what a CR is. That's what a continuing resolution means. Still talking about money. We've been talking about government employees' pay raise. The president issued a 5.2% increase. NTU's pushed for a higher one. We have had difficulty, but we're still working on that. But it's interesting. There's all this disagreement and all these problems with the budgets in general. But this is one budget item that seems to be non-controversial. Nobody has put anything into any of the budget bills that would be different than 5.2%. And when the president proposes that and goes through all the procedural steps to implement that, the Congress is silent on our pay raise. The president's proposal is going to be the one, the pay raise we're going to get. in calendar year 2024. So what's your overall take on this?
Yeah, it is surprising so far that we haven't heard more pushback on that. We have seen that they're looking at giving the armed forces so far everything, and that's where it usually takes the lead, is we try and make sure that there's pay parity between the armed forces, what they're going to get, and what the civilian federal workforce is going to get. And that so far has looked at the 5.2. No one has had a real big disagreement on that. The vice president recently said something about the Biden administration has proposed a 5.2% pay raise. So all signs are still pushing towards that, which would be a very good thing. People are saying, well, last year's didn't make up for inflation. Well, unfortunately, it's not based on inflation. It's based on what the political headwinds will bear and what people are willing to push for. This year, even though we think it should be higher, it's still looking like the 5.2, which would probably be closer to 4.7 with 0.5% for locality pay, is something that's going to happen unless there's something that comes in the last minute of a budget deal, which does unfortunately occur, that can negatively impact federal employees.
So as always, NTE will keep a very close eye on this, and we'll keep you updated on this podcast. We've just had a 1-year anniversary for the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, this is IRA, not in individual retirement accounts. This is IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, when we talk about it in this context. So Inflation Reduction Act was a huge piece of legislation. Part of it was extra funding for IRS. Had to take what I think it was a $20 billion raise or cut to get the debt ceiling taken care of. So it's still there, slightly reduced. I guess it's more than slightly reduced, but there's still a substantial amount of money in that Inflation Reduction Act extra funding for IRS. So as we celebrate, I guess, the 1-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act, any thoughts on your part?
Yeah, I think it's something that was sorely, sorely needed for the IRS to be able to start gearing up. I mean, just the level of service on the phones alone, going from somewhere around 12% to 87% during the filing season, starting to be able to do the hiring that we need to go after folks who are not following the tax laws like they should, and are either being audited or for collection work for folks who do owe their taxes and for whatever reason aren't paying them. The fear mongering that we heard out there, that the IRS is going to hire the 87,000 jackbooted agents to come busting down your door with guns drawn, is absolutely comical. Was at the time, still is. Basically, this is to do the function of the IRS, and for God's sakes, I'm so happy that we're starting to modernize. These folks in the service centers who do the real tough work of having to basically input returns, things of that nature, are getting more scanners to be able to slowly pull us into the late 1990s, early 2000s, to be able to do this. And it just is going to benefit the taxpayers. That's what the bottom line is. All of this money that's going in, not only is it helping employees, helping hire more, things of that nature, but it's benefiting taxpayers in the long run. And that is so very important for the work that we do. And yeah, we're going to, that 20 billion that we've been cut, we've been told we can go back and get it. And probably towards the back end of this, we will need that money, because we want to make sure that we complete, get the hiring up to where it needs to be, because it's starting to, but it's not anywhere near where it needs to be. And keep the modernization on track, make sure that we have, better systems, things of that nature, to be able to help our employees and help the American taxpayers. So it's a great start for 1 year. I give, NTU, leadership and Doreen Greenwald and Tony Reardon an awful lot of credit for helping push this. And Commissioner Rettig, former Commissioner Rettig, and Commissioner Werfel for having, going to the Hill, making sure that they, very clearly state what we need to do, and it is starting to implement it. And Commissioner Werfel hit the ground running and hasn't stopped. And I truly believe he's trying to make a culture change in this organization, and hiring more and modernizing more is a big part of it. I've lost you on the vocals, Larry. I cannot hear a word you're saying.